At the beginning of the film, we are introduced to a young man named Kyle, who is a resident at a rehabilitation center. The scene unfolds in the facility's canteen, where Kyle encounters Sonia, another patient, who is idly etching marks on the table. It becomes evident that this facility houses individuals recovering from drug addiction, and today has been designated Sorry Day, a day when all the residents are encouraged to apologize to those they've hurt due to their addictive behaviors. Amidst this somber backdrop, we meet Bob, the man in charge of the facility. Meanwhile, the tension escalates when Kyle's friend Michael is tripped by another resident, causing him to fall. This act incites Kyle to confront the offender, escalating into a heated altercation. Bob arrives just in time to defuse the situation, demonstrating his pivotal role in maintaining peace within the center. In the following scene, the residents gather for a group therapy session led by Bob. He earnestly encourages everyone to participate in the day's task of making amends, emphasizing its mandatory nature. Bob promises that those who complete this task will be rewarded with a week-long outing, offering them a much-needed respite. In the next scene, we see Kyle driving to his sister Charlotte's school, hoping to seek her forgiveness. Upon spotting Kyle, Charlotte immediately walks away, clearly unwilling to engage with him. At that moment, the school's principal, familiar with Kyle's past misdeeds, approaches and sternly advises him to leave quietly. Meanwhile, Sonia visits the hospital to meet her father. She stands outside his ward, observing him through the glass, overwhelmed by hesitation and unable to muster the courage to face him directly. Simultaneously, we follow Michael as he goes to meet his father at an institution in Mission City. However, his appearance ignites his father's anger, who harshly berates Michael, blaming him for his current plight. Disheartened by his father's harsh words and lack of forgiveness, Michael leaves the institution. The following day, Bob asks Kyle to share his experiences with the group. However, before Kyle can begin, Michael interrupts by storming out, loudly criticizing the therapy as nonsense. After the session, Sonia and Michael find solace outside the facility, smoking together while Michael continues to vent about Bob's harsh treatment. During this moment of camaraderie, Bob approaches Sonia to inform her that she has a phone call. After briefly leaving to answer it, Sonia returns visibly shaken and reveals to the group that her father has passed away. That evening, as the trio contemplates their own sorrows, news flashes on the television about a man who jumped to his death from the Mission City Dam. Suddenly, the lights go out. Michael, who was in the bathroom, checks the switchboard, while Sonia attempts to turn lamps on and off to restore light. Meanwhile, Kyle, tinkering with the TV's switchboard, inadvertently causes an electrical short that shocks all three of them. The next day, they notice something astonishing. Their day is unfolding exactly as it did yesterday, suggesting that the events are repeating. Sonia, observing the table where she had been etching marks, notes there should be 93 marks, but she only made 92. Armed with the knowledge of the previous day, she heads to the hospital again, while Michael returns to the jail to confront his father, this time knowing exactly what he will say. Kyle, also aware of the repetition, waits outside his sister Charlotte's school again. He refrains from calling out to her, but once again, the school's principal approaches and tells him to leave, echoing the events of the day before. In the repeated group therapy session, as events begin to unfold identically to the previous day, Michael starts laughing, realizing the absurdity of their situation. In the next scene, the trio discusses the possibility that the electric shock from the previous night has trapped them in a time loop. As before, Bob approaches to inform Sonia of a phone call, which she already knows is from her father. Now fully convinced that they are stuck in a repetitive cycle, Michael suggests that they need to break the loop by doing something different. Kyle mentions seeing a news report about a man jumping off the Mission City Dam and proposes that if they could save this man, it might break the loop. Despite rushing to the dam, they arrive too late. The man has already jumped. That night, as they reflect on their situation, Kyle tries to find a silver lining for Sonia, noting that at least she can see her father every day because of the time loop. Sonia responds that while she can see him, she is unable to truly connect or come close to him. This realization attempts to offer some solace, but Sonia, overwhelmed by the implications, walks away, struggling with the reality of their predicament and her inability to alter the outcomes. The next morning, Kyle wakes up and realizes they are still trapped in the time loop. He explains to the others that the shock they experienced has likely caused their current predicament. Sonia, feeling desperate, suggests perhaps they should try shocking themselves again before abruptly leaving the group. Michael appears the most relaxed about the situation, suggesting that they should simply enjoy the freedom the time loop offers, since everything will reset the next day. However, Kyle is not convinced by this carefree approach. In the following scene, Kyle and Michael visit a liquor store where Michael brazenly steals alcohol. They manage to deceive the store owner and escape in a stolen car. Their escapade continues as they head to Bob's house and recklessly trash the place, getting so caught up in their antics that they fail to notice a police officer standing right in front of them. Mr. Gerald arrests both Kyle and Michael, throwing a taunt at Michael about his father as he does so. He put them in lockup. Afterwards, Kyle's mother arrives at the police station and releases him, leaving Michael alone in the lockup. Outside the police station, Kyle's mother scolds him, but Kyle, unresponsive to her admonitions, and walks away. On the other hand, the TV was showing news about the same man who had jumped from the dam. So Kyle turned off the TV, shutting out the news of a man who had jumped from the dam, and steps out onto the balcony where he starts to observe Sonia. The two engage in a conversation on the balcony where Sonia expresses her concerns about the repercussions of their actions should the time loop not reset. She fears the punishment for the thefts committed that day. Afterwards, Kyle falls asleep, only to awaken in another new time loop. Venturing out, he inquires if there have been any thefts reported nearby. Relieved to hear none were, Kyle heads to the canteen. There, he and his friends begin to jest about Bob, indulging in a bit of lighthearted mockery and revelry. Later, the trio ventures to a bar where they create a scene, followed by a theft at a liquor store, emboldened by the belief that their actions will be erased when the day resets. Kyle then takes everyone to his D-dealer, Tico, where he unexpectedly encounters his sister and her friend Michelle. When Tico makes a crude comment about his sister, Kyle confronts him, but Tico, being physically stronger, forcefully ejects him from the premises. Subsequently, Michael leads Kyle and Sonia to an abandoned house where he had been producing D. Michael offers them his D, casually remarking that everything will reset by tomorrow anyway. Under the influence, the trio steps outside to enjoy themselves. Michael starts shooting beer cans while Kyle sits under the open sky, absorbed in his thoughts. Michael approaches Kyle and reminds him of the earlier incident involving his sister, which stirs Kyle into action. He grabs his stun gun and confronts Tico, taking him to a secluded area. There, Kyle forces Tico to eat garbage at gunpoint, a decision that later leaves Kyle feeling remorseful. In the next scene, the three friends find themselves at the dam, where Michael, heedless of the potential danger, begins to play around on the railing. Kyle warns him that it could be risky, especially since they cannot be sure if the day will reset again. Ignoring Kyle's caution, Michael continues his reckless behavior, which prompts Sonia also to climb onto the railing, swept up in the moment's thrill. Afterwards, Michael distracts Sonia without worrying about her concerns, but she loses her balance and hangs perilously from the railing. Kyle tries desperately to save her, but without Michael's help, Sonia falls and dies. This tragedy deeply angers Kyle, but Michael coldly reminds him that it will all reset tomorrow and Sonia will return. The next day, Kyle rushes to the canteen, relieved to find Sonia already there, waiting for him. Michael curiously asks Sonia what it felt like to die, to which she replies that she remembers nothing after falling from the bridge. Following this harrowing incident, Kyle and Sonia resolve never to indulge in such recklessness again and express a determined desire to break free from the loop, a sentiment not shared by Michael, who storms off in anger upon hearing their decision. In a subsequent scene, Kyle mentions to Sonia that each loop always involves her father's death. Sonia reveals that her father treated her terribly and she wants nothing to do with him. Just then, they witness someone attempting to jump from the dam. Kyle and Sonia rush to save the person, discovering she is a young woman. They are relieved and happy to have saved someone's life. Moments later, as they notice a police car passing by, Kyle and Sonia decide to follow it, uncovering a horrific scene where a girl has been assaulted. Kyle is shocked to learn that the victim is Michelle, his sister's friend. As Kyle speaks with Michelle, he quickly realizes that Michael was responsible for her assault. Fueled by anger, Kyle drives to confront Michael, physically attacking him while condemning his actions, particularly questioning how he could harm a minor. Michael coldly responds that it doesn't matter because everything will reset the next day and Michelle will remember nothing. This horrifies Kyle, who can hardly believe Michael's indifference. Michael retaliates, accusing Kyle of not being a saint himself, reminding him of his own misdeeds, including thefts and the torture he inflicted on Tico. This confrontation deepens the rift between Kyle and Michael, highlighting their moral divergences. In the next loop, Kyle attempts to reconnect with his sister Charlotte. Typically, she ignores him, but this time, perhaps influenced by Sonia's presence, she agrees to talk. The four of them end up in a restaurant, enjoying a seemingly peaceful moment together. However, the tranquility is disrupted when Michael appears and begins taunting Kyle in front of everyone. The situation escalates when Officer Gerald arrives at the scene. Upon seeing the officer, Michael starts hurling insults at him. In response to Officer Gerald's derogatory remarks about Michael's father, Michael, overcome by rage, pulls a gun on Officer Gerald. Kyle tries to calm Michael down, but the situation quickly escalates when another police officer attempts to intervene and Michael shoots him. Following this, Michael flees the scene, leaving Kyle to console his sister Charlotte, who is terrified by the violence she has witnessed. In the next loop, Kyle, fueled by a surge of anger and resolve, confronts Michael with a rod, attacking him and then locking him in a room to prevent further violence. Kyle secures Michael by taping his mouth shut before leaving the scene. He then encourages Sonia to visit her father in the hospital. While Sonia goes to the hospital, she ultimately lacks the courage to face her father and leaves without meeting him. In a subsequent scene, Kyle and Sonia share painful memories from their childhoods. Kyle recounts an incident where debt collectors violently attacked his sister at their home, deepening the bond between him and Sonia as they share their traumatic experiences. This sharing brings Kyle and Sonia closer together. Kyle later attempts to reason with Michael, but Michael remains unrepentant, seeing no wrong in his behavior. Michael provocatively claims that Sonia had been flirting with him and that they had been intimate, which enrages Kyle. Kyle punches Michael, urging him to change his ways, but it's clear that Michael is not inclined to reform. Kyle, frustrated and disappointed, leaves to meet his sister again, but she refuses to see him. In a moment of mutual support, Sonia tries to reassure Kyle that everything will be all right, but she also shares her fear that Michael might be right about them being permanently trapped in the loop. In the next cycle, Kyle arrives at the canteen only to find it empty. He asks Bob about Sonia and Michael's whereabouts, but Bob is unaware of their location, raising Kyle's suspicions about Michael's intentions. Driven by concern, Kyle heads to Michael's hideout, where he finds Sonia and Tico bound to chairs. In a terrifying turn of events, Michael forces Kyle at gunpoint to slit Tico's throat. Hesitant and frightened, Kyle watches in horror as Michael shoots Sonia in the leg to coerce him into compliance. Panicked, Kyle ends up slitting Tico's throat. After committing this horrifying act, Michael escapes. Following this ordeal, Kyle rushes Sonia to the hospital. Later, he catches Michael attempting to harm Michelle again. A fierce fight ensues between Kyle and Michael, culminating in Kyle shooting Michael in the stomach. In the subsequent loop, Kyle checks his stomach for a bullet wound but finds nothing, confirming the reset of their reality. With a newfound resolve, Kyle accompanies Sonia to meet her father, where she forgives him, understanding that he was near death that day. Afterward, Kyle goes home and convinces his mother to let him see his sister Charlotte. He sincerely apologizes for his past mistakes, promising to fulfill his duties as a responsible older brother. In the next scene, Kyle discovers that Sonia and Michael are missing from the facility. Suspecting a repeat of previous events, he returns to Michael's hideout, where, just as before, he finds Sonia tied up. Michael had spiraled into a complete psychopathic state, seeking to punish Kyle by torturing Sonia. In a twisted game, Michael proposes a deadly version of hide-and-seek. If Kyle and Sonia evade capture, they are free. If caught, they face a day of torture. With no other options, Kyle and Sonia desperately flee into the forest, with Michael in hot pursuit on his bike, firing shots as if hunting them. They manage to hide behind a car, while Michael is preoccupied shooting at a random woman. Seizing the moment, Kyle and Sonia make their escape. Michael, in his frenzy to catch up, nearly collides with a truck and falls off his bike. After he fatally shoots the truck driver, he notices an unusual phenomenon. Snow is falling around him, a first in the many loops they've experienced. This change in the environment signals something profound. Sonia realizes that the sudden appearance of snow might signify that they have atoned for their sins, suggesting that their relentless cycle through the time loop might finally be coming to an end. In the next scene, a police officer arrives at the hospital to meet Kyle and Sonia and takes them to Kyle's house, where Michael had held Kyle's sister and her friend hostage. Upon arriving, Kyle tries to persuade Michael to surrender. Despite Kyle's pleas, Michael refuses, repeatedly claiming that Kyle and Sonia betrayed him and left him isolated. When Michael abruptly ends the phone call, Kyle bravely enters the house, but he is stopped in his tracks when he sees his sister at gunpoint. Despite Kyle's desperate requests, Michael remains defiant and shoots Kyle in the shoulder. In response, Kyle tries to make Michael realize that no matter what he does now, he cannot escape the law. Overwhelmed by the fear of imprisonment and the potential for a death sentence, Michael takes his own life. In the following scene, we see paramedics carrying away Michael's body, while on the other side, Charlotte forgives her brother, Kyle. This act of forgiveness among the siblings marks a poignant resolution to their turbulent relationship. The movie concludes on this note. If you liked the video, don't forget to drop a like and a comment. I'll be back soon with another video. Until then, bye, take care, and thanks for watching.